Howdy everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Secret Origins of Nick Edition. As you can tell by the opening, this is the part 2 to the What is a Western episode. I am once again joined by the Yellow Belly Outlaw Chris, and Sheriff Joe is going to continue leading us through this Western episode. If you remember from last time, we had wrapped up describing the basics of what is a Western, the tropes, and we were starting to talk about movies, so we're going to drop right back to where we left off last time.
So, Chris, I am very interested in what you said off air and what you just said just recently about Unforgiven. I see Unforgiven as, I'm going to get to this later on in Clint Eastwood's accomplishments, which are more than just Westerns, by the way. The man is an incredibly accomplished director, actor, and writer.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And but I think his greatest film was Unforgiven. Actually, on my top 10 list, I have another film that's actually higher, but so they kind of like play off each other, but they're both similar characters. So, Chris, tell me about what you thought about Unforgiven and any problems that you have with it or anything you liked about it.
Yeah. So, first I'm going to say this, the cast is great. And I will say that for me, probably the most compelling scene is Gene Hackman in the prison when he's talking to, he's just beat the hell out of is it English Bob? Is that
English
right?
Bob, yes.
Yeah,
Richard Harris.
English Bob, and is talking to and unfortunately I'm going to forget the actor's name, so I'm just going to look it up really fast. But it's the actor who plays the writer, Saul Rubinek, who I love.
Rubinek from Warehouse 13.
I love him.
Great actor.
He's terrific. He's outstanding. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see him in this. But watching Gene Hackman as Little Bill talk it out with Beauchamp was, I thought, the most compelling scene in the movie. It was really, really good. And again, the acting was great. The other thing that I will say that I really, really liked about the movie was that, and they were so, in my mind, they were so close. I liked that they introduced Morgan Freeman as Ned Logan, and there was never any mention of his race. Ever.
Right, exactly.
And here, I know that I know that that's not historically accurate, but and sorry if any little ones are listening, fuck it. Like, populate the town with more black people. If you're just going to say, you know what, we know that this is that the Western is a fantasy. We know that this is not reality. We know it doesn't reflect reality. So lean into it. I wanted to see more than just white people in town because I think that just would have made the movie stronger. I think Morgan as Ned was great. And then, it because the rest of the town was white, there are racial overtones when you have Little Bill whipping Ned for information. He never once utters a slur. And like in the context of the movie, I understand why it happens. But I think that if you put some more people of color in the town and just go, just hire good actors and don't worry about the color of their skin because the Western is already a fantasy, then I think you do it. I think you commit to it, right? But otherwise, I liked the fact that like this didn't become a story of like, ooh, look at, William Money. We know that like, even though he's not a good guy, he kind of is a good guy because, he's not racist like the rest of the people in this town against black people. And it's like, oh, you were so close to just all you needed was more background characters. And I like that was not a dimension of the story because I think we see that a bunch in Westerns.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah. So I'm glad we didn't see that. I think I think it's well acted. I think it's really well directed. The problem I ultimately had was the writing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the problem I had was the writing, and there were two things. One is the fact that, it's just one more instance of, okay, let's make sure that bad things are done to women so that men can come in and save them. And I appreciated that when, the younger, and there are spoilers here, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that,
right,
although Unforgiven was 92?
92, yeah.
92, okay. So, I mean, if you haven't seen it by now, like, no,
the moratorium's off on spoilers.
Get to it.
Yes.
I think it's worth watching. But contextually, like, I had some issues. So the first is that, and here, when I was younger, especially as a fan of comic books, especially as a fan of like those hero stories. I absolutely wrote those little stories myself, where you have the damsel in distress, and so I came in as the male protagonist hero, and I saved them, and that was. But I never wrote them as characters. They were always written in so that they could be saved. That was their entire purpose in the story, and that's exactly what these women are in this story. Every single one of them is there specifically, to serve the men as whores in the story, but also to serve not as characters, but they are there to be saved. And so I think that's problematic. While it is reflective of attitudes of the time and everything, I can't help it. Just like they can't help that the movie was made in 92, I can't help that I'm watching it in 2022, 20 years later.
Right.
Or no, oh my God, no,
30 years later.
Nope, 30 years later.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
All right, well, that feels great.
That makes you feel old, doesn't it? Think how I feel, Chris.
Yeah. So, I was only off by 10 years. It's fine.
Yeah, only a decade.
So just like the movie can't help when it was made, I can't help when I'm viewing it and the lens through which I view it. So, that's fair criticism. Yeah. So I just don't enjoy stories through which, the person, you have people treated as props and as objects. That said, here's another thing that I thought was really, really interesting, and then I felt like they just missed the mark at the end. To me, what was really interesting was the ridicule that was visited upon Beauchamp for his writing and his romanticizing of the gunslinger. And he starts by doing it with English Bob, only to later learn, English Bob is a fraud. I'm going to write about Little Bill, which is Gene Hackman. Which, by the way, watching Richard Harris's English Bob was delightful. Again, the casting, terrific. But then he's writing about Little Bill as like the real deal, right? And he's romanticizing. And then by the time he meets William Money, and Money has gunned down everybody in the pub who was drawn on him,
right?
At that point, and in fact, actually, he shot at somebody who had not drawn on him, which was the Skinny something or other.
Yes.
Yeah, Skinny. I think they just call him Skinny, but he's the guy who owns the bar and whatnot.
The bar and the brothel, right?
Right. Then you have the situation where Beauchamp says, so who did you? Because real gunslingers, Little Bill told me that real gunslingers shoot the biggest threat first. So like he's trying to go through the order, and at that point, William Money says to him, "I can tell you who's going to die last." and it's a great line. It's a great line. But the problem I had was that I liked there seemed to be this sort of meta awareness, right? Of this is not glory. And Money it took him a long time, but he stopped drinking. He's ashamed of what he's done in the past.
Right.
Ned cannot kill this boy. He shot him. He shot the horse. The horse fell on him, and once Ned saw that, Ned could not fire a shot and kill him. And then you had the boy that goes with them and shoots. Man, their names.
I should have wrote them down too, Chris.
No, and it's on me. But anyway, the boy that they travel with, that they're going to split three ways. The one who approaches Money,
the one who thinks he's a gunslinger, right? Yeah.
He shoots the guy. It's his first kill, and he's never going to do it again.
Never going to do it again.
Never going to do it again. So I thought that was all good, and I thought it was like there's this meta awareness of the price that killing extracts. And then at the very end of the movie, and yes, I know he's grief-stricken over his friend, but there goes Clint Eastwood walking right into every trope of the Western we've ever seen. He embraces the bottle. He goes back to drinking after, I think, 10 years of not having had a drop. And he goes and he kills, evidently without remorse. He reverts to the animal that we find out that he always was. He kills those people. There are, as far as we can tell, no consequences. He takes the money, he goes back to his children, and then they leave the area, and he's prosperous in dry goods, is what we're told at the end of the story.
That's right. Yes, yeah.
And so crime
pays in this film,
right? Well, and it's not just the crime pays, because ultimately a lot of the men that the two men who get shot deserve it, in my opinion. They set it up in the movie to be true as well. And then he does, the people he kills are people who draw on him. But he doesn't get shot and die. He embraces the monster, and frankly, it pays out for him and for his children, as well as for Ned's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And it just brought the whole thing down for me. The meta awareness that I thought was there, everything I thought that they were sort of mocking by mocking Beauchamp, they embrace by having Clint Eastwood just single-handedly kill 5 men without taking a single bullet. And it just embraces that trope of, and then he says, if any of you touch any of the whores here again, not women, whores, you touch them again, I'll come back and I will kill not only you, I will kill your wife, I will kill your children. And
that's pretty rough.
It's
stark. It's really
stark. So it embraces all of the things that I thought that they were mocking in the film. And so maybe there's an element here that I'm just not getting, or a level that I just don't understand. But it embraced everything that I think I don't like about Westerns, especially as I get older. And it turned him into the gunslinging hero that boy had always admired. And so what we walk away from it with is like, yeah, everybody around him paid, but ultimately he was the really cool gunslinger who could single-handedly take down 5 guys, one of which is a notoriously good shot in Little Bill. And so the ending for me was supremely unsatisfying, and made me think, okay, well then maybe that meta awareness that I was thinking they were putting out there wasn't there in the first place. I was just seeing a thing that I thought was cool, and it turns out they weren't going in that direction at all. So kind of long-winded, but I think that was ultimately why I came down on the side of, I'm glad, I appreciate you suggesting I watch it. I am glad I watched it, but I don't like it.
Okay, it's fair. I mean, it's a very fair, fantastic review, Chris. I would not call him a hero. He's if anything, he's an anti-hero, which is what Clint Eastwood plays. And if you want to see him at his worst, then you have to see High Plains Drifter, where he completely razzes an entire town. And there's
and I think, again, it's one of those things where when you look at a play such as Macbeth, right? He watching his descent into evil to a point where he basically just throws it all away and decides that he's going to embrace this. That's the journey. And then he pays for it at the end, and he kills people up until the point where Macduff comes and slays him as per the prophecy. No man born of woman. And Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. But we don't get that moment with Will Money. And that's part of the problem I run into, is that when you're talking about whether or not we're talking about bad guys, or anti-heroes, I don't necessarily always need them to get what's coming to them. But it just felt like I was being set up for one thing, and then it took a more predictable direction.
It's fair. Okay.
Yeah, I saw this past weekend, I saw the latest trailer for the movie The Batman.
Oh, okay.
And as I'm watching him walk down this hallway and people are shooting him with automatic weapons and these bullets are bouncing off of his armor, it's like, that's not how armor works.
No,
that's not how body armor works. So, okay, you're making it more gritty and quote realistic, except you're not doing that thing where you say you're making it more realistic, because there's no way Batman stands up with body armor that lets him move to automatic weapons fire and he doesn't go down. So it's just more of the, okay, well, we're going to give the guy a gun, and because he's our hero or anti-hero, he's just a demon who can't be gunned down, and he's going to be cool while he's doing it. It's not even like he forewent the drink and did all of these things. And then, for a moment there, I actually thought he was going to let Little Bill shoot him.
Yeah, right. You did
I thought he was going to hear the gun cock and he was just going to take that last drink. Because he didn't want to let his wife down, but he had, because not even the killing, the fact that he was drinking. And I thought he was just going to go, yeah, you know what? Little Bill is already dead. He's gut shot. So I'm just going to go ahead and let him shoot me and just end it. And especially because his kids are already taken care of, right? That kid was bringing the money back to his home to bring it to his kids and make sure they were taken care of. And Ned's wife had already agreed to check in on them. So ostensibly she'd be looking in after them too. So I thought for a moment we might get that nope, I have failed, and that's just the way it goes. So I've avenged Ned. I did the thing that I need to do, and then he doesn't even take Ned's body, right?
Yeah,
Like he says,
yeah.
"I trust you'll bury him the way he deserves to be buried." Well, what the hell, man?
It's a
Isn't
pretty
he
stark
white?
scene. You see Ned's body in an open coffin.
Oh, it's a brutal, and it's beautifully shot.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's little, what I think of as little things, but I think are actually big things, are the fact that, like, they don't talk about Ned's body being desecrated. We don't see Ned's body being desecrated because I think there's enough black trauma out there that we don't need to see that. And it shouldn't be for show. And I think there's a line to be walked, but I feel as though Ned is his own character. So he's not just a black person to be killed to justify Clint Eastwood going off. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I think I just all sorts of directions they could have gone with the ending and didn't. I just found myself very disappointed.
Okay. All right. Very good criticism, Chris. Very, very well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. James, Silverado, what'd you think of it?
I enjoyed the movie Silverado. I think it had it was a great cast also. I mean,
Yes,
you had,
fantastic cast.
Kevin Kline, Scott Glenn, who I can't remember where else I've seen Scott Glenn. That's why I was like, I know this guy, but I don't remember where
Right
else I've
Stuff.
seen him.
Scott Glenn was in The Right Stuff.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Young Kevin Costner, Danny Glover,
Danny
Brian,
Glover, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Brian Dennehy.
Yeah, I have a quote from Brian Dennehy. Yeah, he has one of my favorite quotes in Western quotes. Yeah. And this movie is the complete opposite of Unforgiven, but it's loaded with tropes, is it not? Right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's loaded with all the tropes are there. I mean, it's sort of like an assembly movie. It's like it's an Avengers assembly movie.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's a great way of putting it. Yes, I like that.
You meet all of these characters. Like I was trying to figure out in the beginning, it seemed to me like, are we just doing these little vignettes with different people here and there? And I guess we are, because eventually all these vignettes pay off when they get into the town proper. And you get to see like how all their stories intertwine. Like you're leaving Danny Glover's character for a while, but he comes back because of what happens with his sister. You meet, you see Brian Dennehy's character in the original town, he goes off, and you meet him again. And when they get to the Silverado, we pick up Kevin Kline's character Peyton just in the middle of the desert after being robbed, and you don't know, and you still don't kind of know what Peyton's past is at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like they allude to it with what Brian Dennehy and his conversations. It seems like, I guess he was a outlaw, kind of. Like he enjoyed, like, it appears like he did some questionable things, but not to the level of Brian Dennehy's character Cobb.
No, not at all. No.
But yeah, then it goes into all the tropes. I mean, it's you have Peyton, or Kevin Kline's character, is running the local saloon. Brian Dennehy's character is the sheriff. Danny Glover, which they, unlike, not like Unforgiven, they lean into the fact that he is black, and they're prejudiced against him and his family, and they basically kill his father and run his
dad,
family.
right? Yeah.
They kill his dad with his dad's gun. Or they kill his dad to take his dad's gun. And Jeff Goldblum shows up. Jeff
Goldblum's in the movie too, right?
And I wasn't sure what character he was going to play, because I've never really seen movies where Jeff Goldblum's the villain, but he turns out to be in league with the sheriff, and he gets Danny Glover's sister almost killed.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it was like, by the end of the movie, though, once you have Danny Glover's character needs to get revenge on them for his father and what they did to his sister. Emmett's character needs to get his brother back, and they need to get revenge for, I guess, the house they burned down was his sister. Scott Campbell and Kevin Costner's, that's their sister they were visiting in the town.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, so they burn her house down because this is all over because Kevin Costner's character is the young hotshot guy, and he's trying to make out with the girl that one of the deputies likes, and then so it's all over a kiss. So it's all this mayhem that happens because they go and like burn down the house of their sister. They arrest Kevin Costner. They take his nephew, and then you got the Avengers assemble at the end. Where you got Peyton, you got Emmett, you got is a Mal, and you got who else is there? And Jake. All four of them are shooting up the rest of the town.
But a lot of steers thrown in for good measure, right?
Yeah, they have the stampede.
There's always you got to have a stampede.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking towards the end. I mean, it was very enjoyable, but again, one of those I guess miracle exemptions. There were a lot of deputies there were a lot of cannon fodder deputies. I mean, they're kind
of like Star Trek red shirts.
Yeah, they killed like 20 deputies, I think.
This movie is a shoot 'em up. This movie is an ensemble piece, and it's. I think they wanted to. They think they leaned to it. Let's just go with the tropes. Let's just have a good time with it. We're not trying to make anything deep here. We're just trying to make a fun action film that's set in the Wild West. So that's why I saw it. Yeah.
No, it was great. And then I forgot, and even her character, Linda Hunt, was in she owns the saloon, and
right.
her and Kevin Kline seem to have like a relationship going, and they used Linda Hunt, I think in this character, her character had more of a character story, that she just wasn't a woman put in there just to be the thing that Cobb could dangle over Peyton's head. I mean, right. she loved that saloon. That was her business. She loved doing it. And then Cobb uses, Peyton's feelings for her to like keep him out of the final battle, which she's then insulted that she's being used that way, and tells him to get in there and fight. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a nice turn of the typical female character that we've been talking about so far in these stories. So right. Yeah, I thought it was a very satisfying ending. It ended like most Westerns, where the drifter into town becomes the sheriff at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, sometimes the drifter gets gunned down when they find out his past, and sometimes he becomes the sheriff or the marshal. Right. Exactly.
I mean, it also has the miracle exemption where, like, Emmett's character, he gets stomped on by a horse and kicked in the head by a horse. One, he's alive.
Justice.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
One, he's alive. Two, Danny Glover's character nurses him back to health, and he's like walking around with a concussion in this cave, and he's like half blinded. And then Danny Glover comes back and says. And Emma's character's like, "Where's my brother?" He's like, "They took him and your nephew." And then suddenly he takes off the bandage from his head, and he can see clearly again.
Yeah,
he's strapping on his gun, and he's like, that never happened. So
no.
I was like, oh, that's like a real superhero trope right there.
It's frontier medicine.
Yeah, frontier medicine.
A bandage will usually do it. I only got winged. I'll just put a bandage on it. That's all.
Right.
I'll be fine in the morning. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it was a good movie. I thought it has all the tropes in it. It had a good cast, amazingly acted, and it was I think fun. It was a fun movie.
Do you guys want to talk about the other two movies, or do you want to move on? Where do you want to go from here? I mean, you want to briefly talk about the other films, or what?
I mean,
those are the two versions of True Grit. I did that just so we could juxtapose the two versions. I mean, we can talk briefly about it if you want to.
Sure. I mean,
we're already talking about our homework. So yeah, I say let's go ahead and talk about True Grit a little bit.
Okay, James, why don't you go first, because you got the original version, right? Yeah. So go ahead.
Again, I think I would say this movie. I mean, I'd seen Chris's version of the movie when it first came out, so I was somewhat familiar with the story. But again, to kind of turn things on its head with the female role, the female lead is the star of the movie. I mean, John Wayne is obviously the star, but Kim Darby is leading this movie. I mean, she's a little. I mean, how old is she supposed to be in this movie?
Well, Kim Darby in that film was 22, but she's supposed to be 14.
Okay, so she's like leading the charge. She's basically running the show, and
exactly
she's running it through her words or running it through her money and
her deeds. Yeah,
and her deeds. Yeah, and
she takes that horse into that river, right? When they go across in the ferry.
Rooster Cobb, Rooster Cockburn, as played by John Wayne in this version, is he is leading the charge through her deeds and through her actions and through her money and Rooster Cogburn is just I like how they portray him as the rough True Grit. I mean, in this movie she says grit I think like 10 times at least to hammer the movie. I don't know if it happens in Chris's version too, but it's not
that frequently, which I appreciate, but Haley Steinfeld who plays Maddie does say it once, but they sort of paper over it and it's okay. It's not awful.
It's not subtle in my version, but not enjoyable. I actually appreciate the movie mostly because You have John Wayne in it. You got Dennis Hopper in it. You
Right.
have Robert Duvall in it.
Yeah, right. Robert Duvall. Yes, exactly.
And but Maddie is the main character, which they keep with. Like once John Wayne's on the scene, they don't push Kim Darby's character aside. She's in it through the whole thing, all the way to the end of my version. So I really enjoyed it, just because aside from the tropes, it's a different way to tell the story, especially having a young female character as the lead. I thought was great.
And something that I'll harken back to what I said before about the landscape or the setting being character. There are some beautiful scenes in that film when they're just riding along, right? Some beautiful scenic shots, wide angle shots that just are actually absolutely breathtaking. And of course Wayne did win his Academy Award for that film. But you're so right. It's really Maddie's story, and it's one of my favorite films. It's you'll see where it is on my list when we get to the top 10 list.
And I feel like she holds equal footing, if not more footing, than Wayne in the movie. Like it's not like she's overshadowed by Wayne's character or John Wayne's persona as in real life. Like she's
right.
She holds the space with him very well.
And this movie wasn't made in 2009 or 2019. It was made in 1969. So yeah, so it's groundbreaking. It's ahead of its time. Yes.
Yeah, no, it was great. Yeah, Chris, I'm interested in like your take versus your version versus my version, because it's been a long time since I've seen the remake.
Sure. Yeah. So I liked it. I didn't love it. I think that I had that similar experience of it being Maddie's story. I don't like the entire cast of it. I'm Josh Brolin is fine, but honestly, I think anybody could have played that part. And I felt that way about a bunch of the parts that were played. That said, Jeff Bridges as Rooster Cogburn is, I just think, outstanding.
Yeah, he's even more gruff and surly than John Wayne. Yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel pushed. So I really, really like it. I like Haley Steinfeld as Maddie. I think I think she was nominated but didn't win, or maybe she did win.
And Chris, she was closest to the age of the actual character than Kim Darby was.
Yeah, I mean, she's
marvelous.
She's
marvelous.
Extremely talented actor. And for anybody who doesn't recognize that name or goes, I think I know that name, but I'm not sure why. That's because she was most recently seen in Hawkeye.
Oh, okay. More reason to watch Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Good.
And while I don't love the character or anything in Hawkeye, she does really, really good work. Okay. So I thought that the main trio, Jeff Bridges, Haley Steinfeld, and I haven't mentioned him yet, but Matt Damon playing Lebowski.
Mm-hmm.
He's really, really good. He just is. He's a strong actor. It's funny because when I was younger, it was so easy to sort of like make fun of him for the work he did in movies. He always did like fine work, but did he really have like chops? But I think he does. I think he does a really, really nice job as LaBeef. So overall, I like it. I don't love it, but I can't tell you that there's anything I really dislike about it. It just doesn't speak to me. But overall, I think it's a well-made movie. I can't tell you, having not seen the original, I can't tell you why they would think they need to remake it. But for all of that, I think, again, I think they did a nice job with it. It is still Maddie's story, which I appreciate. I like seeing how clever she is. So that's really fun. There's a playful aspect to it too that she brings to the table, and I appreciate that as well. I will say that one of the problems I think I've run into with watching Westerns is, and I understand that this is supposed to be a callback to the time, but it's the cruelty we see to animals. And man, I got to tell you that I had forgotten about this because I'd seen True Grit quite some time ago. I think when it first came out was it
2010.
2010. Okay. So I saw it when it first came out. And I can't tell you how that happened, but it did. But I had forgotten that at the very end, again, spoilers. Cogburn is trying to save Maddie from a snake bite, and he just rides the horse, Little Blackie, into the ground, and she's trying to make him stop, and he's decided that he is going to save her life come hell or high water, and he likes it, hitting the horse isn't working anymore, so he stabs the horse in the flank, and it just I know it's fake, but it just cruelty to animals, yeah, it just really upsets me. So outside of that, again, yeah, overall, I like the movie. I just didn't love it, but I can't necessarily give you specifics as to why it doesn't necessarily speak to me. But I did think that the characters were three-dimensional, which was nice. I didn't feel like Maddie is a prop of any sort. So I think
No, not at all.
that's something that carries through too, is that it is her story. And it's interesting watching the whole thing unfold, right? So I will say that that I enjoyed watching the story unfold.
LaBeef survives in the book. I read the book by Portis, but he dies in the film. And also the
first one, he survives.
The first one, yes, the second one was close to the film.
He survives in the remake, although I don't think she ever actually sees him again.
No, and the riding of the horse is not as horrific in the first movie, because James, remember when the horse goes down, he commandeers he steals a carriage from three guys and to get Maddie into town. So they really milk it in the remake. The Coen brothers really milk it in the remake, and I thought that might have been a little bit overdone too. That it was also kind of unbelievable, and that's done at night. That scene is done at night when he's trying to race her to town, where in the original it's done during the daytime. And they're both character-driven films.
I'm sorry, Joe. I have something to add, but go ahead and finish what you're saying first. You said something that triggered my memory.
They're both character-driven films, and that's what I like about it. About a Western, they don't have to be just the typical shoot 'em up. They can be these films with layered characters, and not every scene has to be gunplay and horse chasing and whatnot. You can get these wonderful, as I said, character-driven films that really draw you in. Chris.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that. You reminded me that. And I can't even tell you exactly what it is you said that just made me go, oh, which, again, I apologize for cutting you off. I didn't mean to do that. It wasn't despite the fact that I think anybody could have played Tom Chaney, I don't think it needed to be, I don't think it needed to be Josh Brolin. He was fine, but it wasn't anything special, which is also fine. It's a relatively small part, even though he's basically the crux of the happenings of the movie. He's the reason LaBeef comes out in the first place. He's the reason that Maddie, is hunting him down and ends up with Rooster Cogburn. But anyway, what I wanted to say was he spends a lot of his time feeling sorry for himself. Chaney talks about how unlucky he is, and how these coming down, and how these things have been brought down on his head, and he doesn't deserve better. Mm-hmm. And I will say this: I will say that the way that he commiserates over this and mopes and mopes over it, because he is like he ends up being like vicious, but he is such a weak, cowardly, kind of yellow belly. He is such a weak man who hits people when their backs are turned, and preys on this little girl. He's going to try and strangle her to death to silence her. Honestly, like that really, for me, I thought that was really well done, because that really resonated with the type of male that we see doing these kinds of things. And I thought it was a very accurate portrayal.
Yes.
That you've got a guy who is in that abusive mindset of, why me? It's not fair. And then he goes, and I think the line is, I don't need an affidavit. I just need you silenced. And before he decides he's just going to strangle her to death. He hits LaBeef in the head with a rock from behind. So it's stuff like that I'm going, you know what? I don't know if they entirely meant to do it, and maybe they did. Which, by the way, Joel and Ethan Coen, right?
Yes, Coen.
For anybody who doesn't know, I think it's Ethan Coen who just directed Macbeth.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A film version of Macbeth. Let me really quickly look at it. It's called The Tragedy of Macbeth, and it was directed by, where are you, Joel? It was directed by Joel Coen. And this is the first time that he's gone off on his own and not directed with his brother Ethan. And if you haven't seen it yet, there's a delightful little open criticism out there that is ostensibly written by his brother talking about how terrible this movie is compared to every other movie that he directed with somebody else, and who knows, maybe he just got help from on high, that those other movies, all 18 of them were terrific, but this is just the worst. And I don't know if I don't know if his brother actually wrote it or not. But it's hysterical. But anyway, all that to say, I don't know if they meant to like paint the portrait of a pretty classic sort of beta male abuser, but man, did they do a good job of it with Tom Chaney. So that was a thing that I did appreciate. In the vernacular of the era, he was a dastardly bastard. Yeah, I would say. Yeah. No, I mean, he is. Yes, a dark-germ bastard, they would say. Yeah, he really was. He was a villain you love to hate. And the character actor who played him in the movie you watched, James, the original, that's Jeff Corey, who was a character actor in Hollywood for decades and decades. If you remember the episode The Cloudminders in Star Trek, he's the guy.
Yes, I knew he looked familiar.
Jeff Corey. If you've ever seen Superman and the Mole Men, he's the town rabble riser, the guy that's totally intolerant and trying to gun down the little mole men because they look different. So he plays those roles very well. And I think he was even in the movie then with the giant ants. But Jeff Corey had been around for ages, and I always love him in these character roles. So
yes, though I definitely recognize his face. I'm like, I've seen this guy's face a bunch of times. So he must be just like
He was in. It must have been, as a character actor, he must have been in hundreds of films. Jeff Corey. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was very good and similar. And I think his portrayal is different than Brolin's, but I think he also gives that sort of whimpering coward type of vibe.
He gut shots Maddie's father right there at the beginning of the film.
Yes, he does. Yep.
And what my favorite scene in the film though is it's nothing to do with action, nothing to do with horse riding. Nothing. Maddie bartering to get the money back for the horses. Yeah. Yes, I love that scene, especially in the remake. It's just, she's just so clever, so determined. You just, right then and there, you fall in love with her, and you know that there's no way she's not going to get what she wants. And so that's what really made both films for me. Love those two movies. Yes.
So should we transition into our lists like we did with the mobster movie?
Do you want to do lists first, or do you want to do top 10, or where do you want to go from here? I think we should do a list. No.
Yeah, we should do the list.
Okay, let's do the list.
Yeah.
So,
record, this will mostly be you gentlemen, because I really only have one.
Okay, that's all right.
Western that I would put on here that doesn't even really necessarily fit the genre, but it's the one that I have because it's just not a genre that I ever followed that much. So
we might need a second episode just for my honorable mentions. There's so many. I'm looking at it right now. I must be an idiot. How could I have written this many? Well, I love all these films, but I wrote them all down. Oh my god.
Well, I guess Joe, I think the format we did for the mob movies and the gangster movies was probably good. We saved you for the end.
Okay.
Your movies.
Cool.
So maybe we'll start with your top 10.
I promise to be brief.
Yeah. Chris, I guess since you feel like you have the least amount on the list, do you want to start what you have for your westerns?
Sure. Yeah. Are we just gonna, James? Are we just each of us giving our lists in totality, or are you and I gonna go back and forth before we hand it over to Joe?
I feel like I think what we did with the gangster episode was we just gave our list and talked about them. I think as a total or individually after we've given our list.
All right.
So I think that works as a good format.
Yeah, so I'll say, there's a lot that I think there's some of it that hasn't aged that well at all. But there's still parts of Blazing Saddles that I think are hilarious, that still really, really tickle me. Back to the Future 3 is just, it's set in the genre. Whether or not it's actually the genre, I don't know. I mean, Joe, do you think it's actually the genre, or do you think it's a different genre that like?
No, it's a Western.
Okay.
Yeah, it's by the way, Chris, you've already poached two of my movies.
Oh, no, these are sort of the high profile that
yes.
that and also I don't know that I ever watched Back to the Future 3 if there isn't Back to the Futures 1 and 2. Like, you could tell me it's funny, you could tell me it's good. It's sort of the same thing with with Blazing Saddles. I don't know that I ever watched Blazing Saddles if I don't already love Spaceballs and Young Frankenstein. It's just not a thing that I necessarily pursue. And then I guess my third and sort of final entry on the list is one that I actually, it took a while to grow on me. And again, I don't know if it's the genre or what, but the more I've seen it, and I've now seen it a bunch thanks to my son, because he was really loving it for a while. But it's The Good Dinosaur.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's cool.
The Good Dinosaur is Pixar, and it took a while to grow on me, but it is absolutely like it is a Western, which the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's what this is. And the first time I watched it, I was like, yeah, it was fine. But the more times that I saw it, and honestly didn't really want to watch it, but did, the more I saw it, the more it really grew on me and had these moments. And it did, I think, fit a lot of those tropes. You had characters who come together, but then don't stay together. They don't stay together. Once the job is done, they leave. They leave each other, and it might be tough, but it's the right call for them because they shouldn't be staying together. The environment is a character, and also dictates a lot of what they do. Yeah, I think it was not a thing that I expected, but it really just clicked for me in that way. And also, I mean, it also had a strong cast, but Sam Elliott is in it, and so very, that it really comes across as to me a Western, and it's one that I have over time come to thoroughly enjoy. But it really did take, when I say a bunch of watches, I don't mean I saw it 2 or 3 times. I mean I've seen this movie in the double digits. But you have the young boy Arlo learning under his papa Jeffrey Wright, who's fantastic. And I guess The Good Dinosaur would be my my favorite Western. Unexpected.
Interesting pick, Chris. I've never heard of it. I've got to watch it now.
Yeah, it didn't get press at all, and it's so disappointing too because Peter Sohn or Peter Son, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Sohn. He's worked on a bunch of Pixar movies, but this was the first one he directed, and it was so disappointing that they didn't throw it more support. I think they may not have known what to do with it, because it doesn't necessarily. It's sort of, again, they don't advertise it as a Western. They could have advertised it the way they sort of did with Rango, but they didn't. But it didn't really get the Disney/Pixar treatment, and it's a real damn shame because I think that once I started to sort of figure out what it was that the director was trying to do with this movie, that I really appreciated it. It took me a number of tries to really sort of appreciate what he was doing, and I think he was just functioning on a much deeper level as a director than I was sort of expecting. But yeah, check it out. The Good Dinosaur, Peter Son, who also plays
check it out,
the pet collector in the movie, and is very, very funny. So I think it's worth a watch. He's also he's been an animator. Let's see, an animator, director, a voice actor, and a storyboard artist over at Pixar. He's just really, man, he's really good, I think. So
cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Sounds good, Chris. I like The Good Dinosaur also, so that was a very interesting pick. So I like your list.
Thank you. Yeah, that when I thought of that one, it felt a little bit like the gangster pick of when I said Mask of the Phantasm. We're both like, I guess it is.
Still my favorite pick of any list yet.
Yeah, I sort of felt that way about Good Dinosaur. Of like, no, I hadn't really thought of this, but it is totally a Western. Anyway,
very good. Well, you've poached 2 of mine too, Chris. So that's good. So
I feel like those 2 don't count. I really do, because those two that the 2 that I picked before The Good Dinosaur, they cross genres. They are very much part of pop culture. So I don't feel like those are like, I don't feel like they are legitimate because poachings. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a deep dive where it was like, wow. I think it was Karen on the Christmas episode when I picked that movie Last Holiday with Queen Latifah, And I was like, well, there's no way I get poached here. And then Karen did it. Karen actually poached that. That was a really deep cut. So I'm going to say that, I don't feel like those are really poachings, because I'd still like to hear a little bit about why you, because I know it's on both your lists, why you both picked them, because I'm sure it's for different reasons.
Well, I mean, so I guess I'll get into my list. So I have like, I think 9, Joe, because I'm not as versed in this. So number 9 is Django Unchained.
Okay.
I don't know. It's very violent, but I did enjoy the movie, and it definitely gives a take on. We were just talking about, a black person in the West. So, and it gives a different spin and tale and rewriting of history that Quentin Tarantino likes to do. Then I have Back to the Future 3, which kind of made my list because I don't really know many Westerns, and I know that took place in the West. so I'm putting it on the list. So Chris, I don't know if that's your reasons, but those are my reasons for it.
No, that's fair.
Okay.
Again, it's, movies I like, but gun to my head, you asked me for a Western list, I gave you 3, and 2 of them feel like a reach.
And my next one up is the other pick is Blazing Saddles. Similar thing. It takes place in the West.
Yep.
It's again, not all the humor holds up, but a lot of it does. And I love Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder, I love him. I also love, it didn't even make my list, and I should have pulled it, I also love him in The Frisco Kid too, which
sure, yeah,
with him and Harrison Ford as a two-hander, which is like one of the few times I've seen Harrison Ford not be Han Solo. So it's he had like some different character traits in that movie. So I guess I'll put that in my list too. Why not? I'm not going in any specific order. So I guess
right. Yeah, there you go. Nobody will know.
Yeah. Then next step is The Three Amigos.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
And then kind of going again, mixing up with the comedy is Shanghai Noon with Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson.
Yeah. All right.
Again, it took place in the West, and
you're right. And I will. I mean, you never have to sell me on a movie with Jackie Chan. You just don't.
And then we get into like some more, I guess, not some controversial territory with my picks here. So it doesn't have a movie, but I'm picking it because I not that I was grasping at straws, but I guess I was kind of grasping at straws for my list. The Mandalorian is on there.
Okay.
Sure.
Wrong with that.
I think it's a Western. It seems like a Western to me. It's a Western in space.
I
agree with that, because I have something that I think, unless you poach it, I think is in the same vein. Go ahead. Yeah.
So it's The Mandalorian. I have the movie City Slickers.
Yeah. Okay. I thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's in my honorable mentions.
I mean, it's more of a movie honoring Westerns than it is a Western, I guess. But I think it fits the bill. And my top 2, I guess, are a little. My number 2 is The Big Lebowski.
Interesting. Okay.
I feel like it's a Western. I feel like it's this guy on his own. Plus, you have Sam Elliott as an actual cowboy in it, narrating it. So,
I don't know, friend. That might be that might be a bit.
Do you think he's reaching, Chris?
Sorry.
Do we think he's reaching with this one?
I think it's a little. While I do think like The Mandalorian it can fit the bill, like I don't think Star Wars fits the bill, even though it uses elements of it. I feel the same way about Big Lebowski. I think we have to. I think we gotta bring the buzzer on that one.
You're getting cold out on this one, James.
You're the resident expert, Joe. So I will defer to whatever you decide. But that has me sort of hemming and hawing over here.
Okay, I'll let him finish now.
And then my number 1. I mean, I kind of picked my number 1 based upon the archetype of the drifter, the lone person. Is my number 1 is Logan.
Oh, you know something? This is almost a Batman. Help me here, Chris.
Mask of the Phantasm.
Yes, pick. That's a really good pick.
No, that's interesting. I still haven't seen Logan, so I will take
that movie
on that. But he's definitely a drifter.
James, I'll give you Logan over your Big Lebowski.
Okay, yeah. So I feel Logan is one they use. I mean, again, not that it's beautiful stuff we're looking at. The time period that they put him in, the space they put him in, is definitely a character. He has to help a young girl.
Yeah,
it feels very true grit.
Very true British. No, I think people even said that when that movie came out, that it was harkening back to some of the true grit. Yes.
He's the reluctant hero at this point. He's retired. He's very Rooster Cogburn-y kind of. So I actually was rewatching parts of Logan in preparation for this episode just to kind of see, and I really forgot how good the movie is, because I got like sucked into, like, I was just going to watch a bit of it, and I kept like watching more and more because I was like, wow, I forgot how good this movie was and how great Hugh Jackman is playing the old retired hero who wants nothing to do with the hero business and just wants to get through his day. And he kind of has that, again, going back to what little I knew about Westerns. I mean, I knew more because I kind of made this list after I did the homework of watching the two movies. He's, aside from taking care of an elderly person, he's trying to, aside from being alone, he wants to just find his little corner of the world and settle down and just live out his life, which I feel like is a theme in Westerns. People just kind of want to settle, and then that's where they're going to live the rest of their life. So
that's the theme of most of the gunslinger who wants to change his style of life, i.e. Shane and Gregory Peck's the gunfighter. Yes, that is a common theme. They just want to leave their past behind and settle down. Yeah.
It seems like most of the heroes in Westerns, again, from the broad swath that they know about Westerns, is like the main hero's usually done something bad in his life.
Yeah, usually has, yes.
And he wants to get away from it and be forgotten. So that's why I thought Logan would fit the bill. So
good picks.
Thank you. I'm sorry I had one controversial one in there, but
no, that's good. And frankly, you had a top 10, I had a 3.
Top 3. Well, I should say that both Blazing Saddles and Back to the Future 3 were actually my honorable mentions. They weren't really my top 10. So I wasn't really poached on my top 10. So, you want me to give mine now?
Yes, Joe.
I will be brief. I really will. I'm going to go.
This is the star. This is the star of the show. This is what people who are listening to this episode who want to watch Westerns, they want to like hear your list so they can. I want to hear it and watch those movies too. So.
I've also got a top 10 TV Westerns too. Because actually, to be fair, my introduction to the Western, like most people from my age, my era, the baby boomers and so on, a little bit later on, came by Westerns via the television, because in the 50s, although I was in diapers, but in the 60s, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a Western on TV. They were just everywhere, and they didn't fall out of favor, at least ratings wise, until the early 70s. But so that's where I came to discover these tales. Okay, so my top 10 movies. I'm going to start with Stagecoach, which we talked about before, because it's the role that made James Bond. What the hell am I talking about? That made John Wayne a star and really put John Ford on the map as one of America's greatest film directors. Shortly after that, not shortly after that, about 30 years after that, yes, John Wayne starred in the movie Chisholm, which I think I've mentioned before, maybe off the air, guys. This is the movie about the Lincoln County Range War, kind of based on it, not totally, but it's a sprawling Western. It's a real shoot 'em up. It's kind of like it's almost like Silverado, but with a more intense and less comedic tone. So that's number 9. Shane. I talked about that earlier. The guy who wants to leave his past behind, but he can't because circumstances won't let him. The town won't let him, and he has to eventually do what he does best, which is gun down those varmints. And then we have True Grit, 2010. We talked about that. Chris talked about that very eloquently. Then number 6 is My Darling Clementine, which I think I mentioned in my opening, not to be fooled by the title. Another John Ford Western starring Henry Fonda about the fight at the OK Corral, so the Earps against the Clanton Gang. Beautifully photographed in wonderful black and white. Black and white works for film noir, but also works for Westerns too, I think. After that, we got the Silverado, which James also spoke about eloquently. My top 4, The Searchers. This is a movie that basically is the deconstruction of the West by John Ford, who had tired of all the Western movies that did, if not through open means or did not put down the intolerance of the West, did not speak to the way the Native Americans were treated. So in this movie, Ethan Edwards, John Wayne, is returning from the South, returning from the Civil War, I should say, and he's a Southerner. And when he comes home, he finds his family is completely gone except his niece, because the Comanche, and he calls them the Comanche, which is kind of like a slur, obviously. And he's a bigot. He's a racist. He's not the hero of this film. And the young Jeffrey Hunter, who plays his adopted nephew as they go on the search to find his niece, is really the hero of the film. And at the very end of the film, when he brings his niece back, he can't go back into the house. And the way that the movie opens is his sister-in-law opens the door onto the plains, and we see him coming on his horse. And the way it ends, kind of like The Godfather, this is probably where Coppola got this from, the door closes on him at the end. He can't come back into the house, even though he brought the girl back to her family, because he's not part of the family. He's just a horrid, terrible man, and it's an interesting, different role for John Wayne to play. And John Ford considers this his greatest film. So I highly recommend. This is one of those films I recommend.
I've written it down. So thank you for that.
Yes,
because that's an intriguing. I'm intrigued. So thank you, Joe, for sharing that.
It's the deconstruction of the Western in 1956, not 1966, 76, 86, but in 1956, right there in the middle of McCarthy era and all that was going on there. Number 3 is The Unforgiven, which Chris again spoke to eloquently about. So I'm not going to go into that. And my top 2, A High Plains Drifter, which I did allude to previous. In this movie, Clint Eastwood is basically a force of nature that sweeps into the town of Lago, and by the time he leaves, it's razed completely to the ground. And do these people deserve it? Yes, but when you watch this film, it's not for children, obviously, but it's so incredible in its starkness, and I wouldn't say it glorifies violence, but it glorifies the violence of the West. Let's put it that way, the time period that it's set in. And he's amazing in this film. And, he's a very taciturn actor as it is in these movies. And he has even less to say in this film than some of his other films. And number 1 is True Grit, 1969 with John Wayne. I love this film. I love the way it looks. It's a beautiful film to watch. Cinematically, it's just a gorgeous film. And, it's John Wayne again breaking the mold of who you think John Wayne is, as he did with Ethan Edwards. Furniture. Ethan Edwards in The Searchers, and then again as Rooster Cogburn in True Grit. He's a completely different character here, and I think he's fascinating to watch. So those are my top 10. And if I would recommend 2 off that list, I would recommend The Searchers, and I would recommend Shane. I think if you haven't seen Shane, you need to see this film. It's not what you think about a gunslinger, and it's a very interesting piece about tolerance and trying to hold back your inner demons, and how it's almost impossible sometimes to do that because of the circumstances and the times in which you live. Quickly, my top 10. Oh, honorable mentions. I'm only going to mention a few.
Joe, I was going to say maybe because I think maybe we want to do another episode. Maybe we should save the honorable mentions and the TV, because I think it'd be a whole separate episode. I don't want you to rush through it.
Yeah, cool. Actually, what I'm really interested in, Joe.
You did have some questions for me, right, James?
Yes, I have some questions.
Yeah, because I do want to get to the questions, but I think the next time we talk about this, Joe, I really would like to hear about. I want to hear your top 10 about television, but I'm also curious to see how the genre, how it translates into television, because you had mentioned how the the environment is a character, right? The setting is a character in the story, and so what's the difference when you're talking about TV? You're talking about a change in budget and change in terms of logistical requirements, and obviously, as we move along. Television has gotten more and more expensive to produce, and the quality's gotten higher. But I'll be curious not right now again, but because I think it's going to be a broader conversation, I'm going to have more questions for you. But when we really dig into it, I'm going to be curious to see how the genre translates into television, and what do you feel like was added, what do you think was taken away, and sort of comparing and contrasting. So I think that's going to be a whole other conversation, because I got all sorts of questions, but I know James has some for now. So, but thank you, Joe, for sharing your
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Yeah, and I think also maybe for the next part of the Western, you could probably, well, one, maybe Chris and I can watch Shane and The Searchers, and we could talk about our thoughts on that.
I think you might want to, I think you.
And then you could also give us at least an episode of one of the, or two of TV shows that we can prep for that episode as well.
Yeah, and we could hit my list of trivia and flashbacks, Western flashbacks that I have.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So rancher Jack Adrian, friend of the town, wrote in and said, what would you say, and maybe you've listed this already, but what would you say is the best Western movie that encapsulates perfectly what a Western is?
I'm going to go with my top pick. I'm going to go with True Grit, 1969.
True Grit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Go with John Wayne's True Grit. Yes.
Right,
directed by William Hathaway.
All right, Jack. So True Grit, if you haven't seen it, you should see it. Or maybe we can have you on or give some notes for the future Western episode.
Mm-hmm.
And also friend of the town, prospector Josh Bernhard.
Is that gold or silver he's prospecting for?
I think I'm not sure. Maybe both. Silver and gold.
Silver. It's the Comstock load of 1845, which gave rise to the town of Virginia City and the TV show Bonanza.
So Josh asks, "What is your favorite spaghetti Western that aren't the Man with No Name trilogy? What's your favorite that is not A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and The Good and the Bad and the Ugly?"
High Plains Drifter.
High Plains Drifter. Okay.
Yeah. For the sheer evil and putting your hands over your face at times violence, but it's just, I mean, Clint Eastwood, I don't know, he must have been angry when he wrote the script, but he directs it so well. It's just an amazing tour de force of, as I said, he's a force of nature. And you don't have to like this guy, but you can't turn away at the same time. It's just like watching a horrible accident, a train wreck or something like that. It's not a train wreck of a movie though. It's an amazing film. So those are
All right, perfect.
Answer to that. Okay.
Well, so you had the answers. You had the answers, Sheriff.
Yeah, I guess I reckon I did. Before we break, can I mention one other Western hero?
Oh, sure.
That you can't. I mean, if you can't talk about the West without talking about the Lone Ranger. When I was a boy, again, back in those back when we didn't have streaming services and DVDs or even video replay, almost every day when you came home from school, you snapped on the TV, usually Channel 11, by the way, you'd catch an episode of The Adventures of Superman or The Lone Ranger. And these are my two heroes growing up. The Lone Ranger was the brainchild of Fran Stryker and George W. Trendle. And he made his first appearance on radio in 1933 and soon after became a multimedia star, resonating with kids, of course, and adults who couldn't get enough of his adventures. But, the Lone Ranger was a pulp magazine star, comic books, movie serials, early and iconic TV series that ran from 49 to, I believe, 57, feature films in the 50s, some later feature films. So, when I think about Westerns, and obviously it was a quote-unquote kiddie Western, but if you look at IMDb and you look at the ratings that they give most of the Lone Ranger episodes, they're usually 8 and above. And when you want to talk about a good show for a child to watch in any time period, I think it's the Lone Ranger, because it teaches about tolerance, courage, the courage of your convictions, respect, loyalty, bravery, and just treating people the way you want to be treated, which is kind of what, the message was of The Adventures of Superman too. I know we talked about this way earlier on. So anybody out there who's looking for a TV show for their children, if you can find it, and it's a Western, I would highly recommend The Adventures of the Masked Rider of the Plains and The Lone Ranger. So that's how I close that.
That's a perfect transition, Joe, to wrap up the show. Like we usually give out recommendations. So was there any other recommendations you want to give this week other than the Lone Ranger?
Unfortunately, I left them in the living room, so I can't get to them now. But there is a Dynamite Publishing Lone Ranger Green Hornet team up that took place in the 30s because, and we can get into this later on in the next episode, the Lone Ranger is the great granduncle of Britt Reed. John Reed, the Lone Ranger, is the great uncle of Britt Reed, aka the Green Hornet. It's a very good graphic novel. I'm sure it's on our friendly service, James Hoopla. So I would recommend that.
Yes, Hoopla.
Yes, I would recommend that as an interesting team up of two different eras. So,
all right, very cool.
All right.
Excellent. Chris, you have any recommendations for this week?
Nothing that I'm reading right now, but I will say that without any fanfare at all, which is insane to me, Netflix is just now, today or tomorrow, dropping the second season of Raising Dion. And Raising Dion was the first season. I just really enjoyed the hell out of it. It's about this single mother. She's trying to protect her son has superpowers.
Yeah,
and she's trying to protect him from exploitation, but also her husband had mysteriously died, and so she's sort of like looking into that as well. And man, the first season I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. What the hell? But I really, really enjoyed it. And then I just turned on Netflix like I think last night because my son he really likes this documentary series Night on Earth, and he especially likes the ocean episode. And so I went to go turn on Netflix. And I kind of screeched because I was like, what? I had no idea that because I've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and then I just sort of forgot all about the show, honestly. So a very, very pleasant surprise. So if you're looking for something to watch, I think Raising Dion on Netflix is really enjoyable, and the second season has either just dropped or is about to drop.
Very good.
I'll check it out.
What am I reading? Well, I don't know if I enjoy it fine. It's not like something people have to go read, but on Hoopla, I'm reading Justice League Endless Winter.
Okay, read that.
And I will say, much like childhood, I read it because McFarlane Toys was making toys from this comic book series. And I was like, well, if McFarlane's making toys about it, it must be good. And it's okay. I mean, I find it interesting, but I wouldn't say it's something that you have to get out and read, but I think it's an interesting story. It deals with Viking gods and the Justice League, and Justice League Dark is a part of it. So I think it's an interesting story.
Good save, James. We almost got through the episode without mentioning Hoopla. Well done.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
that was close.
I know. Something that's not on Hoopla that I'm reading, but I picked up on Kindle when it was on sale. Is I'm reading Volume 2 of Spider-Man by JMS, the Giant Omnibus.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
I'm loving it. I'm following up our mob episode. I just finished reading the story where he's tackling the mob, the reanimated mobster that was gamma radiated.
That one was an interesting story. I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it. I mean, again, it's all the human elements that JMS infuses into Spider-Man, and some of the moral quandaries. He, like in the gangster story, like this monster is after the boss that gave the order to kill them back in the 70s, and he wants Spider-Man to protect him, and Spider-Man's, he's going to give Spider-Man $10,000, and Spider-Man's like, well, I guess I could keep the money. So it's very funny. And then also at the same time, Spider-Man's patching up his marriage with MJ. So again, I love his run, and the omnibus is great. So I love catching up on the stories. And then I guess the last thing I'll recommend, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it kind of ties in, is the Book of Boba Fett. Probably by the time this episode airs, it will have wrapped up or is wrapping up. So definitely, there's definitely Western vibes in the Book of Boba Fett as much as there's in the Mandalorian. So if you have not caught that show, which probably if you're our audience, you have already, but if you haven't caught Book of Boba Fett, it is worth watching. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for listening to the show. I'd like to especially thank our outlaw, Chris, for being here.
No, it was my pleasure.
How'd you get to be the outlaw, Chris?
I think that was the designation James was going to give me, but I would only accept it if he added yellow belly.
Yellow belly. You varmint.
And, of course, our leader for this show, Sheriff Joe.
It's been my pleasure, folks.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, if you want to join in the conversation, leave comments about this episode, you can find us on Facebook, in the Facebook group. We also have the Gmail, Secret Origins MC. Instagram account is also Secret Origins MC. And if you have time to rate, and leave a review for our show, wherever you listen to this podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. It really does help, I think, getting us noticed in the rankings, or at least more noticeable to people if they're searching for podcasts in this genre. So we would greatly appreciate it. And we thank you for listening, and we will talk to you soon.